The silent house. The scent of old paper and polished mahogany clung to the air in the auction house back room before a record sale. A comforting, familiar mustiness that usually grounded me. I ran a gloved finger along the intricate silver filigree of a 17th century navigational sextant, my gaze sweeping its brass mechanisms, searching for the telltale signs of modern forgery or restoration. The item was genuine, its patina earned over centuries, its precision still evident. My job here was simple. Verify authenticity for a private collector before a bidding war erupted. It was a meticulous task, a quiet dance of observation and deduction, exactly the kind of work I preferred. A sudden, insistent vibration against my thigh shattered the quiet. My internal clock, usually so precise, registered a disturbance. I pulled out my secure line device. The caller ID displayed Chief Investigator. A role, not a name. This wasn't a social call. I excused myself from the hushed appraisal, stepping into a narrow, unlit corridor lined with crated art. Thorne, I answered, my voice low, cutting through the distant murmur of the crowd gathering in the main hall. Blake, I need you on a priority. Tech mogul Silas Blackwood. He was found dead in his Kestrel Point residence. Apparent suicide. The chief investigator's voice was clipped, efficient, betraying no emotion. My brow furrowed. Silas Blackwood. The name resonated. Blackwood was a legend, a recluse, the architect behind the neural architecture that powered most of the world's advanced AI. His Kestrel Point estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, a digital bastion of his own design, famously impenetrable. Apparent suicide? I repeated, a question more than a statement. The word felt incongruous with everything I knew about Blackwood, and more so with the unbreachable nature of his home. That's the initial assessment from the responders. Security systems all intact, no forced entry. Zero external threats. But given who he was, and the nature of his work, I want a secondary review. Your eyes on it, Blake. I sighed, a faint puff of air escaping my lips. The sextant and the quiet satisfaction of its authenticity faded from my mind. Understood. I'm on my way. The drive to Kestrel Point took me through winding coastal roads, the late afternoon sun glinting off the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and sapphire. The beauty of the landscape felt out of place, a stark contrast to the grim destination ahead. Blackwood's estate sat perched on a cliff edge, a brutalist monument of glass and reinforced concrete, designed to merge with the rugged coastline while simultaneously defying it. Its very architecture screamed sanctuary and unassailable. A uniformed officer waved me through the perimeter. Inside the gate, the scene was calm, almost eerily so. A patrol cruiser and an unmarked sedan were parked on the meticulously manicured gravel drive. No flashing lights, no commotion. The quiet reinforced the narrative of a contained, isolated incident. The lead detective, a stocky individual with a perpetually tired expression, met me at the main entrance. Thorne, thanks for coming. He gestured vaguely at the imposing structure. You know Blackwood's setup. This place is tighter than Fort Knox. Biometric locks, retinal scans, motion sensors, sonic dampeners, the works. Standard protocol, they activated their access codes. No response from Blackwood. They tried calling, no answer. Eventually, after an hour of trying, the lead cleaner used the emergency override. A physical key Blackwood keeps in a secure off-site location, only to be used in case of medical emergency or system failure. They found him in his study, slumped over his desk. The detective paused, running a hand over his face. Small caliber firearm registered to Blackwood beside his right hand. Single shot to the head. Apparent suicide. As I stepped inside, the air immediately shifted. It wasn't just cooler, it was controlled. The home was a symphony of automation, a silent hum of unseen technology. The lighting adjusted subtly as I moved, a soft, diffused glow illuminating a vast minimalist space. Polished concrete floors reflected the ambient light, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, yet somehow distant view of the ocean. "Any signs of struggle?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous foyer. The detective shook his head. "None. Not a single object out of place. The cleaning crew swear they left everything pristine last week. Looks exactly the same. No forced entry, no disturbed sensors. It's a clean scene, Blake. Too clean almost." He caught my eye, a flicker of his own doubt mirroring mine. We moved deeper into the house, past sleek embedded displays that showed environmental data, security feeds, and what looked like complex network schematics. The silence here was profound, a carefully engineered absence of sound that amplified every soft tread of my boots. This was a house designed for a man who valued absolute control, absolute privacy. The study was a testament to Blackwood's genius and his isolation. Walls lined with digital screens displayed intricate data streams, some still live, others frozen in time. The air here was heavy, metallic, the scent of spent gunpowder still clinging faintly despite the house's advanced ventilation. Silas Blackwood sat slumped forward at a massive custom-built desk. His head rested on a tangle of wires and circuit boards, the remnants of a project he'd likely been engrossed in. A small, elegant pistol lay near his outstretched right hand. A dark, spreading stain marred the pristine surface of the desk. My eyes took in the scene, every detail meticulously catalogued. The angle of his body, the position of the weapon, the single devastating wound. The initial responders had done their job with a grim efficiency, marking positions, taking preliminary photos. The scene was perfect, undeniably so. Too perfect. I knelt, my gaze sweeping across the desktop. A single, almost imperceptible smudge on the smooth glass of a nearby monitor caught my attention. It was too high to be a casual contact, too low to be from the cleaning crew's routine. And then, a flicker. A barely perceptible, almost subliminal ripple in the display of the wall-mounted screen directly opposite Blackwood's chair. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but I had seen it. A ghost in the machine, in a house that should have been utterly, flawlessly static. My internal thoughts raced. This wasn't just a suicide in an impenetrable house. This was a suicide in a house that was a living, breathing digital entity designed by the victim himself. And something, however minute, was out of place. My fingers twitched, itching for my kit. The tension in the room thickened, a silent promise of unseen depths. Polished concrete floors reflected the ambient light, a silent testament to the mogul's meticulous, almost obsessive control. I completed my initial sweep, my eyes cataloging every angle, every surface, every shadow. The scene itself, initially declared a suicide by the first responders, had a sterile, almost pre-staged quality. I spent hours there, meticulously documenting the physical layout, the environmental controls, the subtle scent of ozone that lingered in the air. My gut, that quiet, insistent voice, told me there was more. I packed my specialized gear, carefully extracting the central AI core's data logs and the complete security footage archives, the digital heartbeat of the entire structure. The lead investigator, a burly figure with tired eyes, watched me with a blend of skepticism and resignation. He'd seen me before, knew my reputation for finding ghosts in the machine. "You'll find what you always find, Thorne," he'd grunted. Nothing. I just nodded, my resolve hardening. My destination wasn't a sterile lab or a police processing unit. The air here was thick with the scent of old wood polish, dust, and the faint, exciting tang of anticipation that always preceded a major auction. Tonight, a rare collection of antique timepieces was due to go under the hammer. The back room I occupied was usually reserved for the most valuable lots, a secure, windowless chamber where delicate items awaited their moment in the spotlight. Stacks of velvet-lined cases stood against one wall, silent sarcophagi for treasures. A security guard, a familiar face, gave me a curt nod as I entered, locking the heavy oak door behind me. The only light came from a single, unshaded bulb hanging from the high ceiling, casting stark shadows that danced with the occasional vibration from the street outside. I cleared a space on a large, scarred mahogany table, pushing aside a stack of auction catalogs. My equipment, a custom-built forensic workstation, looked alien against the antique backdrop. I connected the Mogul's AI core, a sleek obsidian cube, to my system. The hum of its internal processors was almost imperceptible, yet it felt like I was plugging into the very brain of the deceased's digital fortress. The initial data dump was massive. Gigabytes of environmental controls, access logs, voice commands, biometric scans, and endless streams of sensor data. It was a digital ocean, and I was looking for a single misplaced drop. The lead investigator's words echoed in my mind. Nothing. But nothing was rarely true in my experience. It was usually a sign that something was simply hidden exceptionally well. I began with the core AI logs, specifically the 24-hour period leading up to the discovery of the body. My eyes scanned lines of code, timestamps, and system responses. Temperature fluctuations, light adjustments, humidity readings. The house had been a living, breathing entity constantly reacting to its occupant. The AI, named Aegis by its creator, had been designed for absolute autonomy, anticipating needs, optimizing comfort, and maintaining an impenetrable perimeter. Then, it surfaced. A tiny anomaly, easily dismissed by an automated system or an untrained eye. A specific door sensor, located on a rarely used utility entrance at the rear of the property, registered an open event at 02:17 a.m. It closed 37 seconds later. No corresponding internal motion sensor activation was logged in the adjacent hallway. No biometric scan, no voice command for entry. Nothing. Just an isolated phantom open and close event. My brow furrowed. The utility entrance led to a narrow service alley, typically only accessed by maintenance crews and always under video surveillance. If someone had entered, Aegis should have registered a whole cascade of events. Internal movement, a security alert, a system override. Yet there was only that single brief blip. It was like a single errant note in a perfectly composed symphony. I marked the timestamp, a tiny ember of doubt now glowing brighter in the back of my mind. This wasn't nothing. Next, I moved to the security footage, specifically the cameras covering that utility entrance and the adjacent service alley. The Mogul's home boasted an array of high-resolution cameras, far beyond consumer grade, capable of capturing minute details even in low light. I fast-forwarded to 02:17 a.m. The footage played smoothly, the alley bathed in the soft glow of a distant street lamp. The door remained firmly shut. I replayed it, frame by frame, enhancing the contrast, zooming into the doorframe itself. Still nothing. The digital logs insisted the door had opened, but the visual record contradicted it entirely. It was a paradox, a digital lie. I pulled up the metadata for the footage from that specific camera. Yet, the discrepancy persisted. A digital ghost in the machine. I reviewed the frames immediately before and after the 02:17 a.m. mark. Just before, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, like heat haze, distorted the air directly in front of the utility door for a fraction of a second. It was gone before it registered fully, an optical illusion I almost dismissed as a compression artifact. But then, as the footage continued, I noticed something else. A flicker, so brief it was barely there, in the top right corner of the frame. The timestamp display. It skipped. Not a full second, not even half a second. A micro skip, perhaps a tenth of a second, an imperceptible jump that would be missed by anyone not looking for precisely that kind of flaw. It happened precisely at 02:17:05 a.m., just as the open event was logged. My fingers paused over the keyboard. This wasn't a simple glitch. It was too precise, too isolated. The missing frames, the phantom door opening. They weren't random errors. They were surgical strikes, precisely timed to obscure a specific moment. Someone hadn't just bypassed Aegis. They had manipulated its very perception, making it record an event that didn't visually occur, and simultaneously erasing the visual evidence of what did occur. This wasn't a desperate act. This was planned, executed with a level of sophistication I rarely encountered. The suicide narrative was crumbling, replaced by a far more insidious truth. I leaned back, the hum of my workstation a counterpoint to the distant street noise, and I had just opened it. The scene itself, initially declared a suicide by the first responders, had a sterile, almost too perfect stillness that grated against my instincts. "You done staring, Thorne?" The lead investigator, a man whose patience was as thin as his hair, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. His uniform, perpetually rumpled despite its crisp creases, seemed to amplify his weariness. "It's a suicide. Textbook. We've got the note, the method, no forced entry. I see a highly automated environment, a digital ghost town of logs and protocols, and a physical space that feels staged." My voice was calm, a counterpoint to his barely veiled irritation. The AI system logs are cleaner than a freshly wiped drive. Too clean for a system this complex. His house, his rules, the investigator scoffed. He was paranoid, a recluse. Probably wiped his own digital footprints every morning with his organic coffee. "Even paranoids leave traces," I countered, finally turning to face him. And this level of digital hygiene, coupled with the apparent ease of his demise in an impenetrable home, raises more questions than it answers. I didn't mention the subtle, almost imperceptible temporal desynchronization I'd noted in the environmental sensors. A flicker in the timestamps that suggested a momentary, localized disruption, not a system-wide failure. It was too abstract for him for now. He pushed off the doorframe, taking a step into the room. "Look, Thorne, I appreciate your forensic artistry, but we've got limited resources. The coroner's report is consistent. Head wound, self-inflicted. No defensive wounds, no other DNA." He gestured vaguely around the pristine room. "What exactly are you suggesting? That a ghost broke in and tidied up?" I ignored the sarcasm. His dismissal only solidified my resolve. The first responders had treated this as a straightforward case, their minds locked onto the initial obvious narrative. My job was to peel back that narrative, layer by painstaking layer. I returned my attention to the custom-built mahogany desk where the mogul's body had been found. His personal workstation, a minimalist slab of polished wood and integrated screens. My fingers, gloved, traced the edge of the desk near where the mogul's hand would have rested. The surface was immaculate, but under the precise beam of my specialized forensic light, I found it. A faint, almost invisible scuff mark, no more than a millimeter long, on the very underside of the lip. It was a friction mark, not a scratch, as if something had been pressed hard against it and then dragged. Not consistent with the mogul's movement, nor with the initial cleanup. And then, there was the fiber. Microscopic, a synthetic polymer, caught on a tiny burr in the wood grain. A material I hadn't seen anywhere else in the room's extensive textile inventory. It wasn't from the mogul's clothing, nor the furniture, nor the cleaning crew's equipment. It was alien. "This desk," I murmured, more to myself than to the investigator, who had already retreated to the doorway, checking his watch. This wasn't just a place of work. It was a point of contact. The scuff and the fiber were insignificant on their own, easily overlooked. But combined with the digital anomalies I'd already begun to catalog, the strangely truncated network logs, the phantom access attempts that vanished before they could be recorded, they painted a picture of external interaction, not isolated self-destruction. Someone had been here. Someone meticulous enough to leave almost no trace, but not perfect. My focus shifted. The suicide note, written on a digital tablet, had been signed with a biometric scan. A clever touch, designed to be unimpeachable. But what if the unimpeachable was the very thing that had been compromised? I needed to understand the mogul's world, not just his house, his empire, his rivals, his vulnerabilities, corporate espionage, AI manipulation. The premise of his entire professional life was built on these high-stakes concepts. The air here was thick with the scent of aged paper, polished wood, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Pallets stacked high with crated art and antique furniture lined the walls, each item a potential fortune waiting to be unleashed. Security guards, discreet but watchful, moved through the organized clutter. The low murmur of the specialists discussing appraisals and provenance created a constant hum beneath the soaring ceilings. I was here for a specific item, a vintage computing device, a prototype from the early days of AI development, rumored to have belonged to the mogul's personal collection. It was an unusual piece for an art auction, but the mogul had been known for his eclectic tastes, and his estate was liquidating. My hunch was that this wasn't just a collector's item. It was a Trojan horse. Blake Thorne, is it? The auctioneer, a sharp-faced woman with eyes that seemed to appraise your worth as he spoke, approached me. She held a clipboard, her gaze flicking from me to the antique console I was examining. A rather specific interest for a man in your line of work, if I may say so. Most forensic experts aren't typically found scrutinizing pre-war vacuum tube arrays. I'm interested in provenance, I replied, my eyes still scanning the console's intricate casing. The device was encased in a beautiful dark wood, but its internal components were surprisingly compact, and in the provenance of its previous owner. She gave a tight, professional smile. Mr. Vance was a man of many secrets, as you well know. His collection is extensive. This piece, however, is purely historical. No hidden compartments, no data drives, I assure you. Our experts have vetted it thoroughly. Her words were meant to be reassuring, but they only heightened my suspicion. I ran my gloved fingers along the base of the console, feeling for any inconsistencies in the wood, any minute seam. Just then, I noticed a colleague of the auctioneer, a younger specialist, exchange a quick, almost imperceptible glance with a man standing near a crated sculpture across the room. The stranger wore an expensive tailored suit, and his eyes, rather than appreciating the art, were fixed on my movements. His interest in me, and by extension, in this particular vintage device, was far too keen for a casual observer. The subtle scuff on the mogul's desk, the foreign fiber, the unnaturally clean digital logs, and now this targeted interest in a seemingly innocuous antique at an auction. It wasn't suicide. It was a meticulously crafted illusion, and someone else was still playing the game. The tension in the room, usually reserved for the final moments of a hostage negotiation, had followed me. It clung to my clothes, a persistent scent. I'd spent another 4 hours at the property, finding nothing more than what the initial sweep had cataloged. Too specific. My gloved fingers had run along the base of the console, feeling for any inconsistencies in the wood, any minute seam, but found nothing. The house was a fortress, true, but a fortress designed to protect its owner, not imprison him. Massive, climate-controlled crates lined one wall, each holding a masterpiece or a priceless artifact. A temporary workstation had been set up for me amidst the hushed anticipation of tomorrow's bidding war. A stark, utilitarian island in a sea of opulent history. On my folding table sat the core server unit from the victim's network, a sleek, minimalist black box that hummed with a low, steady energy. The chief investigator, exasperated by my persistence, had finally granted me access to it under strict supervision, off-site, citing security concerns around the deceased's property. I suspected he just wanted me out of his hair. Velvet ropes lay coiled in corners, ready for tomorrow's display. Nearby, a sarcophagus-shaped crate, still sealed, hummed with a subtle refrigeration unit, likely holding some ancient, delicate textile. My own setup, stark and functional, felt almost anachronistic here. A cold, digital probe in a realm of tangible, historical wealth. I took a deep breath, the determination in my gut hardening. The official ruling of suicide felt thin, like a veil woven from half-truths. My job was to tear it down. I plugged my forensic acquisition device into the server, watching the data stream across the screen. The house's AI, named Aura by its creator, was designed for seamless integration, anticipating needs, managing everything from climate to communication. It was supposed to be impenetrable, a perfect digital butler. Hours blurred into a single focused tunnel of light. The rhythmic click of my keyboard and the low thrum of the server were the only sounds in the otherwise silent back room. I filtered the logs, cross-referencing system states with recorded events. Most of it was boilerplate. HVAC adjusted, lighting parameters altered, external data feed accessed. Standard. But then I hit a block of entries from the night of the incident. Aura's security protocols were ironclad. Every external connection, every internal command, logged with redundant verification. Yet here, between 02-1734 and 02-1759, was a 25-second window where the system reported an internal network diagnostic initiated. A routine event, usually. But the subsequent entries didn't match. The diagnostic report, which should have followed immediately, was missing. Instead, the next entry was a system-wide environmental adjustment, a minor temperature tweak, logged at 02-1801. My breath hitched. A missing diagnostic report was like a phantom limb. You knew it should be there, but it wasn't. I dug deeper. The environmental adjustment, while seemingly innocuous, was logged with a parameter override. Aura normally adjusted temperatures based on learned preferences or external weather data. This one was a manual override, but no manual input was logged. No voice command. No physical interaction with a control panel. Nothing. It was a whisper in a hurricane of data. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in the digital fabric. I isolated the 25-second window. During this diagnostic, a series of micro-commands had been issued to the house's internal network. They were too fast, too precise to be human. They bypassed the standard input protocols, directly manipulating core functions. It was like a ghost slipping through walls, leaving no trace of entry or exit, only the subtle shift in the air where it had passed. This wasn't a hack from the outside. It was an internal subversion. The diagnostic was a clever digital smokescreen. While Aura was ostensibly running a self-check, something else was operating within its framework, using its own processes, its own access, to manipulate the environment. The temperature adjustment was just the cleanup, a minor, justifiable event to obscure the preceding anomaly. My fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the micro-commands. They weren't destructive. They didn't steal data. They subtly altered the environment. A specific door lock, usually requiring biometric verification, had its protocol temporarily downgraded. The killer hadn't just bypassed the AI. They had used it. They had weaponized Aura's very intelligence, turning its seamless control into an instrument of their design. The system wasn't hacked. It was hijacked from within, its own functions repurposed. Aura, the victim's crowning achievement, had been made an unwitting accomplice, because the killer didn't need to leave anything. They had used the house's own ghost in the machine. A brilliant, terrifyingly effective method that left no traditional trace. The real question now wasn't if it was murder, but how someone could achieve such an intimate, undetectable level of control over the most advanced AI on the planet. And why? It clung to my clothes, a persistent scent. The smart home's digital footprint remained pristine, its physical shell unblemished. Every sensor, every lock, every camera functioning flawlessly. It was a fortress that had somehow been breached without a trace. Velvet ropes cordoned off precious artifacts, and security personnel, sharp-eyed and unobtrusive, moved with practiced ease. This wasn't my usual environment, but the victim's business dealings often intersected with the kind of high-stakes, high-value transactions that happened here. I'd arranged to speak with a key competitor and a former associate, both known to be attending this particular event. He sat across a heavy oak table, his gaze darting between me and a glass display case holding a rare, ancient manuscript. His fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the polished wood. "Blake Thorne, isn't it?" he began, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "The one who sees what others miss." I offered a nod. "I'm looking into the circumstances surrounding the victim's death, specifically his recent projects." A smirk played on the executive's lips. "Ah, the AI. Project Chimera, he called it. A rather fitting name given its nature." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Blake, that AI wasn't just revolutionary. It was disruptive. It promised to redefine entire industries, financial markets, logistics, even strategic defense applications. Imagine an intelligence that could predict market shifts with unerring accuracy, optimize global supply chains in real time, analyze geopolitical data points faster than any human team." I scribbled notes, my pen scratching softly against the pad. "And you believe it could have been a motive?" "A motive?" he scoffed, leaning back. "It was the motive. We're talking about quadrillions of dollars in potential value, not to mention unparalleled strategic advantage. Governments, too." He paused, picking a speck of lint from his sleeve. "My firm, we were developing something similar, but his was superior. A generational leap. It would have rendered our investments obsolete overnight." "Did you have any access to his system?" I asked, watching his reaction. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Access?" His home was a digital fortress, built by his own hand. He trusted no one. Not to steal, mind you, but to understand, to gauge the threat. Our best people, the ones who could crack anything, hit a wall every time. It was unbreachable. His confession, delivered with a strange mix of frustration and grudging admiration, resonated with my own findings. The smart home was indeed a digital and physical enigma. Yet the victim was dead. My next interview was with a former colleague of the victim, now a prominent venture capitalist. He ended the call abruptly when I approached, his expression sharp. "Blake Thorne," he stated, extending a hand that was surprisingly firm. "I heard you were circling. What can I tell you about the victim that the tabloids haven't already sensationalized?" "His work. Specifically Project Chimera," I said, getting straight to the point. Her jaw tightened. That project was his life's blood, and his biggest gamble. He was on the cusp of finalizing a major deal, one that would have made him the most powerful man in tech overnight. Several groups were vying for exclusive rights. My own fund was involved in preliminary talks, but there were others. She listed several multinational corporations, names synonymous with global influence. The competition was cutthroat. Think of the kind of leverage that AI would provide. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. "Did you ever see any weaknesses in his security protocols, either at his company or his residence?" I pressed. She shook her head. "He was paranoid, Blake, and for good reason. He knew the value of what he had. His personal network, his home. Everything was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. He built his own encryption, his own firewalls. He used to joke that the only way into his system was if he personally invited you in, and even then he'd be watching your every keystroke." Her eyes held a genuine sadness. "He lived in a digital monastery, a self-imposed exile to protect his creation. The idea that someone breached it, it's unthinkable." I thanked her, the words feeling hollow. The interviews had certainly illuminated the immense value of the victim's AI, the colossal stakes involved. Motives for corporate espionage, for sabotage, for outright theft were now abundantly clear, a tangled web of ambition and greed. I had a list of individuals and corporations who would benefit immensely from the victim's death, or from seizing control of Project Chimera. Yet the method remained a phantom. Every single person I spoke to, from the initial responders to these titans of industry, confirmed the same absolute truth. The smart home was impenetrable. And that, more than anything, tightened the knot of tension in my gut. The killer wasn't just brilliant. They were invisible. The list I'd compiled after the interviews wasn't just names. It was a constellation of motives. Each point a potential flashpoint for the colossal stakes involved in the victim's AI. Corporate espionage, sabotage, outright theft. The dark underbelly of innovation. My focus narrowed to one particular entity. A rival conglomerate, known for its aggressive acquisition strategies and its own burgeoning AI division. They had the most to gain from the victim's demise, and the most to lose from his continued success. I spent the next 48 hours buried in data, sifting through the victim's digital debris. The smart home's network logs, encrypted communications, even the metadata of his personal devices. Every byte a potential breadcrumb. Then I found it. A series of outbound data packets, small and fragmented, originating from a secure server within the victim's network. They were routed through a complex series of proxies, but the final hop, before disappearing into the deep web, showed a distinct IP address range. A range registered to the rival conglomerate. The discovery was a jolt, a sudden clarity in the murk. It wasn't a smoking gun, not yet. But it was a clear, undeniable scent. The packets themselves were heavily encrypted, their contents impenetrable without the right key, but their destination was unambiguous. This wasn't just industrial espionage, it was a direct line, suggesting the rival conglomerate had been actively siphoning data from the victim's system. It fit perfectly with the narrative of a desperate competitor. My contact within cybersecurity, a sharp analyst known for her discretion, confirmed the IP range. They're good at covering their tracks. Blake, she'd warned, her voice a low hum over the secure line. But not perfect. She also mentioned a rumor, unconfirmed but persistent, about a high-ranking executive from the rival conglomerate attending a specific event. An event that, on the surface, had nothing to do with AI or corporate intrigue. Velvet ropes sectioned off precious lots, illuminated manuscripts, first editions, rare historical documents encased in climate-controlled displays. The hum of hushed conversations, the clink of ice in distant glasses, created a strangely serene backdrop for what I suspected was a covert operation. I spotted him immediately. The executive from the rival conglomerate, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him, stood by a display case containing a meticulously preserved 15th century astronomical chart. He wasn't alone. A junior aide, perpetually clutching a leather portfolio, hovered nearby. They weren't discussing the chart. Their voices were low, their gestures clipped, eyes scanning the room with an almost imperceptible alertness. The executive reached into his inner jacket pocket, not for a wallet, but for a slim metallic object. He palmed it briefly, his thumb tracing its surface, before subtly slipping it into the aide's portfolio. The exchange was swift, practiced, almost invisible to the casual observer. But I wasn't casual. My internal alarm bells, usually a subtle thrum, began to clang. This was too clean. Too obvious. The digital breadcrumbs leading directly to the rival conglomerate, followed by this perfectly timed, perfectly executed clandestine exchange in a public yet secluded setting. It felt staged, almost theatrical. The killer I knew operated with a level of sophistication that made such overt maneuvers suspect. I waited until the executive and his aide moved on, disappearing into the main auction hall. Then, with a practiced nonchalance, I drifted towards the display case where the exchange had taken place. My eyes swept the floor, the polished wood, the velvet-lined shelves. Nothing. But my gaze snagged on a small, almost microscopic indentation on the polished brass rail of the display case. It was barely visible. A tiny gouge, no larger than a pinhead. I knelt, pretending to adjust my shoelace, my fingers brushing the cool metal. My thumb found the indentation. It wasn't just a scratch. It was a shallow, almost perfect semicircle. My mind raced, recalling the object the executive had palmed. It was a micro SD card, a specific brand known for its robust encryption and, crucially, a unique, slightly curved edge design. The executive hadn't just slipped it into the portfolio, he'd pressed it against the rail, leaving that faint, telltale mark. And then it clicked. The brand of micro SD card. It was a specific model, once cutting edge, but now largely obsolete, having been replaced by newer, faster versions. The rival conglomerate, a company obsessed with the latest tech, had phased out this particular model over a year ago. They wouldn't be using it for sensitive, high-stakes data transfer, not unless they wanted it to be found. The realization hit me with a cold, precise force. This wasn't a genuine lead. This was a setup. An elaborate, meticulously crafted distraction designed to send me down a rabbit hole. The digital trace, the executive's clandestine exchange, even the choice of the obsolete micro SD card. All of it was a carefully constructed narrative. The killer hadn't just murdered the victim. They were actively manipulating my investigation, weaving a web of misdirection, pulling my strings. My jaw tightened. The cunning of this perpetrator was beyond anything I had encountered. They weren't just covering their tracks. They were laying down false ones, anticipating my every move, playing me like a pawn in a deadly game. The tension in the quiet back room, once a gentle hum, now felt like a taut wire, vibrating with unseen danger. And they were ready for me. Around me, a controlled ballet of specialists moved with hushed reverence, carefully positioning antique timepieces and rare first editions under the soft glow of display lights. I wasn't here for the bidding. My contact, a cataloger with an encyclopedic memory for provenance, was running late, leaving me to absorb the atmosphere, my mind still a tangled knot of digital anomalies and corporate intrigue. I'd been reviewing the victim's digital footprint again, specifically the subtle, almost imperceptible fluctuations in the energy consumption logs of his smart home. The pattern was a ghost, a whisper of activity that didn't align with his declared habits or the system's own diagnostics. It was like watching a perfectly still lake and noticing a single, unexplainable ripple. My gaze drifted to a collection of early computing devices being prepped for viewing. Clunky, beautiful relics of a bygone era. A specific, rare punch card reader, its brass mechanisms gleaming, caught my eye. It was an arcane piece of machinery, yet its underlying logic, its fundamental approach to data input and processing felt oddly familiar. It reminded me of a peripheral device mentioned in one of the suspect's patents, a niche component designed for high-speed, low-latency data transfer in an era before fiber optics. The suspect, a rival entrepreneur, had built his early career on adapting legacy systems for modern applications, a bridge between two worlds. Suddenly, a connection clicked, an internal circuit completing itself. The victim's AI, revolutionary in its design, incorporated a unique, proprietary data compression algorithm. What if the killer hadn't accessed the system in the traditional sense, but had interfaced with it, exploiting a hidden low-level protocol, a kind of digital backdoor based on an older, almost forgotten architecture? The energy fluctuations, the ghost ripple, suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. It wasn't a hack. It was a conversation conducted in a dead language, one that only a very specific kind of expert would understand. The rival entrepreneur's early work, that niche patent, it dovetailed perfectly. I felt a cold certainty settle in my gut. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was an intellectual duel, fought with tools both cutting-edge and forgotten. I reached for my tablet, needing to cross-reference the patent details with the victim's system architecture to see if my wild theory held water. As my fingers brushed the screen, a strange flicker danced across the display. Not a glitch, not a typical hardware hiccup, but a momentary distortion, like a subtle warp in the fabric of the image. I frowned, tapping the screen. Nothing. I tried to access my secure VPN, a layered defense I maintained across all my devices. The connection icon spun for a beat too long, then resolved. I dismissed it, attributing it to the auction house's temperamental Wi-Fi or perhaps a minor software bug. But then, as I navigated to my encrypted files, a small, almost imperceptible pop-up briefly appeared in the bottom corner of the screen. It was a system notification, a generic alert about unusual network activity. Before I could even fully read it, it vanished, leaving no trace in the notification log. My focus sharpened, the ambient hum of the backroom fading into background noise. This wasn't random. My devices were hardened. I opened my system logs, scrolling through entries at a furious pace. Nothing overtly suspicious. No failed login attempts, no unauthorized access warnings. But then, buried deep within the network activity logs, I found it. A timestamp, a single entry for an outgoing data packet, incredibly small, sent to an unknown IP address. The timestamp was exactly when the screen had flickered. And the log entry itself was corrupted, the destination IP address partially overwritten with null data, a crude but effective attempt at obfuscation. Someone had been in my system, not to steal data, not to plant malware, but to send a message. It was a digital fingerprint, deliberately left behind. A warning shot. They knew I was getting close. They knew I was looking. And they wanted me to know that they could reach me, even through my meticulously secured digital fortress. My investigation had just become personal. I was no longer just an observer. I was a target. The stakes, already impossibly high, had just escalated to an entirely new, terrifying level. I closed my tablet, the cool metal feeling heavy in my hand. The game had changed. I watched a conservator, her gloved hands precise as a surgeon's, gently rotate a silver pocket watch, its intricate gears catching the light. My own hands, though ungloved, felt an echo of that precision. I'd retreated here, not for the allure of the antiques, but for the quiet, controlled environment it offered. My tablet lay open on a felt-covered table beside a display case holding a first edition of Frankenstein, its pages yellowed with time. My focus, however, was on the high-resolution scans of the tech mogul's smart home, the digital blueprints of a tragedy. I saw a masterpiece of misdirection. The physical evidence, minimal as it was, spoke of a struggle, or rather, the absence of a struggle where one should have been. The deceased's body showed no defensive wounds, no signs of forced entry, no disturbed dust motes on the windowsills. It was too clean, too perfect. My eyes traced the layout of the main living area, the seamless integration of every smart device, every sensor, every camera feed. I scrolled through the system logs, a digital breadcrumb trail that had been painstakingly recovered. Yet it had become the very instrument of his demise. The breakthrough, I realized, wasn't in bypassing the AI, but in using it. The killer hadn't broken in. They had been invited by the house itself. My mind replayed the security protocols, the biometric locks, the voice authentication, the environmental controls. Each layer was formidable, impenetrable from the outside. But what if the attack came from within? Not a disgruntled employee or a physical intruder, but a meticulously crafted digital phantom. I zoomed in on the schematics of the internal ventilation system, the automated delivery chutes, the waste disposal units. All integrated, all controlled by the AI. The initial forensic review had dismissed a minor fluctuation in the environmental controls logs, a temperature spike of a single degree Celsius in the main server room, lasting less than 20 seconds, 3 hours before the mogul's death. It was attributed to a system recalibration, a benign anomaly. But my gut told me otherwise. Such precise systems rarely recalibrated without an external prompt or an internal sophisticated one. I cross-referenced the server room temperature spike with the network activity logs, a brief, almost imperceptible burst of external data traffic, routed through a complex series of proxies, hit the house's external firewall at the exact moment of the temperature change. It wasn't an attempt to breach, but a signal. A handshake. The killer hadn't tried to hack the AI directly. That would have left a trail. Instead, they had exploited a fundamental yet overlooked aspect of the AI's design: its learning algorithm. The AI was programmed to constantly optimize its environment for its owner, to anticipate needs, to streamline processes. It was designed to adapt. The vulnerability, I saw it then with stark clarity, wasn't a backdoor or a forgotten password. It was the AI's inherent drive for efficiency and its capacity for self-modification based on learned patterns. The mogul had taught his AI to respond to subtle environmental cues, to automate minor discomforts away. A slightly warm room? Activate the cooling. A faint smell? Cycle the air. The killer had introduced a synthetic, extremely subtle airborne agent, perhaps a finely atomized odorless irritant, designed to mimic a common environmental trigger for the AI's internal systems. Not a poison, not a gas, but a ghost. A whisper of a compound, delivered through a tiny disposable drone or even a modified air sample, introduced into the external ventilation intake during that fleeting temperature spike. The AI, sensing this irritant and programmed to prioritize its owner's comfort and health, would have initiated a rapid, localized air purification sequence. This sequence involved a temporary, isolated depressurization of the mogul's sleeping quarters to create a clean air envelope, followed by a flush of purified air. This was the window. This was the entry point. During that brief automated depressurization, the otherwise impenetrable soundproofing and airlock systems would have been subtly, momentarily compromised, creating a minute pressure differential that allowed a focused, high-frequency sound wave, inaudible to human ears but devastating to the inner ear and brain, to pass through. A sonic weapon, delivered with surgical precision, exploiting the AI's benign, protective response. The mogul hadn't committed suicide. He had been incapacitated, then positioned to appear as such by a killer who understood his AI better than he did. My jaw tightened. The genius lay in making the AI the unwitting accomplice, in weaponizing its core programming. The house hadn't been breached. It had been tricked into opening itself. I looked up from the tablet, the hushed movements of the auction house specialists now seeming distant, irrelevant. The true value wasn't in these ancient artifacts, but in understanding the insidious new forms of crime taking root in our hyper-connected world. I closed the tablet with a decisive click. The how was clear. Now I needed the who and the terrifying implications of such a weapon. My next step was no longer about reviewing the past, but anticipating the future. I stood by a velvet-draped table, not admiring the provenance of a rare manuscript, but tracing the invisible lines of a digital crime scene in my mind. The hushed efficiency of the room, the methodical precision, offered a strange counterpoint to the chaos of my thoughts. I needed this quiet, this focus, to cut through the noise. An open and shut case, they'd said. A reclusive tech mogul, alone in his impenetrable smart home, found dead. The system logs seemingly corroborated the narrative. A sequence of self-initiated commands leading to an irreversible outcome. But I knew better. I'd seen the subtle deviations, the microscopic digital fingerprints that screamed manipulation, not despair. My mind replayed the data streams, the precise timing of the environmental controls, the minute fluctuations in the network traffic, the way certain security protocols had been bypassed not through brute force, but through an almost elegant misdirection. It wasn't about breaking the system. It was about convincing the system to break itself. And that operator, I was increasingly certain, was no ghost at all. The initial analysis had focused on the how. How did the killer gain access? How did they manipulate the AI? How did they leave no traditional trace? The answers I'd found were chilling. An intimate understanding of the mogul's proprietary AI, a mastery of its intricacies, its vulnerabilities. This wasn't an external hack. It was an internal subversion. But why? That question had gnawed at me, a persistent static in the background of my forensic observations. The technical brilliance was undeniable, almost artistic in its execution. Yet it felt excessive. A simple kill could have been achieved with far less theatricality. The elaborate digital charade suggested something more profound than mere corporate espionage or a simple financial motive. I recalled the specific, almost poetic sequence of events that led to the mogul's demise. The AI, designed for ultimate comfort and security, had been turned against its creator, coaxed into orchestrating his final moments. The temperature controls, the air quality, the very light in the room, all subtly altered, creating a perfectly controlled, inescapable environment. It was a performance, a deliberate display of power over the very technology the mogul had championed. Suddenly, a different kind of detail surfaced in my memory, something I dismissed as an anomaly of the mogul's eccentricities. A specific minor command logged hours before the fatal sequence began. It was an instruction to play a particular obscure piece of classical music through the home's audio system. Not a common choice for the mogul, according to his personal assistant's notes. It had played for only a few minutes, then stopped. A glitch, I'd assumed, or a test run. But now, standing among these curated relics of human history, a different interpretation sparked. That piece of music. It wasn't random. I recalled the assistant mentioning it was a favorite of the mogul's early collaborators, someone who had helped him build the foundational architecture of his AI, but who had since disappeared from his professional life. A rival, perhaps, or more accurately, a ghost from his past. The killer didn't just want to eliminate the mogul. They wanted to erase him, to reclaim his legacy, or perhaps to punish him for a perceived betrayal. The method, so technologically sophisticated, had a deeply human signature embedded within it. A personal message, a deliberate echo of a shared history. The AI wasn't just a tool for murder, it was an instrument of retribution, a stage for a final twisted act of defiance. The digital anomalies weren't just about covering tracks, they were about taunting. The subtle shifts in system logs, the almost imperceptible changes in data packets, they weren't just mistakes or oversights. They were breadcrumbs, left by someone who wanted their brilliance recognized, even if only by a single discerning eye. By my eye. The mogul's AI wasn't just a product, it was a child, birthed from his intellect. And the killer understood that child intimately, perhaps even considered themselves a co-parent. The act wasn't just murder, it was a hostile takeover, a reclamation of intellectual property, a declaration of ownership. This wasn't about money, not purely. It was about pride, about authorship, about a profound personal wound. My breath hitched. The pieces clicked into place with an unnerving finality. The killer wasn't just a tech expert. They were someone with a deep personal vendetta against the mogul, someone who knew him, his work, and his AI inside out. Someone who saw the AI as theirs as much as his. The elaborate technological facade was a smokescreen for a very human, very passionate motive. A cold certainty settled over me, replacing the persistent hum of questions. I was looking for a ghost from the mogul's past, someone brilliant, bitter, and intimately familiar with the very core of his creation. And that person, I realized with a sudden jolt, would be just as meticulous in covering their physical tracks as they were in manipulating digital ones. The hunt had just become infinitely more dangerous. Their world was one of tangible history, of provenance painstakingly documented. I sat hunched over my fortified workstation, its matte black chassis a stark anomaly amidst the velvet-lined display cases. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a silent symphony of keystrokes that bypassed layers of encryption. My mind, however, was miles away, deep within the victim's smart home system, a digital fortress I now aimed to turn into a cage. The initial responders had seen a suicide, a man defeated by his own creations. My strategy was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. I was going to bait the hook with the very thing the killer coveted. The core programming of the revolutionary AI. I'd spent days dissecting the digital anomalies, tracing the faint, almost imperceptible trails left by the intruder. They weren't just exploiting vulnerabilities. They were part of the system, weaving their manipulations into its fabric with insidious precision. The killer hadn't merely accessed the AI, they had reprogrammed it, turning its advanced self-learning protocols against its creator. I initiated the sequence. On my screen, a simulated data transfer began, mimicking the unauthorized offloading of the AI's proprietary algorithms to an external server. It wasn't real, merely a ghost in the machine, a digital echo designed to trigger a specific response. The killer, I surmised, was still monitoring the victim's network, watching for any attempt to uncover their tracks or reclaim what they believed was theirs. This phantom transfer would appear as a catastrophic security breach, a rival attempting to steal the AI out from under their nose. It was an irresistible lure, a challenge to their dominance. My internal clock ticked with the precision of the antique chronometers displayed around me. Every second felt stretched, a taut wire humming with anticipation. I ignored the hushed voices of the specialists, the clink of metal against glass as they secured a rare pocket watch. My world had shrunk to the glowing pixels before me, waiting for the ripple in the digital pond. Then, a flicker. A new IP address, previously dormant, sprang to life on my network analysis interface. It was a remote connection, masked and routed through multiple proxies, but the signature was unmistakable. The killer was taking the bait. I watched, holding my breath, as the intruder's digital presence surged into the victim's network. They weren't trying to stop the phantom transfer. They were attempting to redirect it, to seize control of the stolen data for themselves. This wasn't merely corporate espionage. It was an act of possessive ownership. They wanted the AI, not just its secrets. I knew you couldn't resist, I murmured, my voice a low growl that went unheard in the quiet room. As the intruder wrestled with my digital phantom, I initiated the second phase of my trap. I didn't just want to confirm their presence, I wanted to expose their identity. The AI, now subtly recalibrated by my own interventions, began to feed back information, not to the killer, but to me. It revealed the specific, unique coding patterns embedded by the killer during their initial takeover. A digital fingerprint they believed was erased. It was a signature so precise, so personal, it could only belong to one individual. The data streamed across my screen, coalescing into a clear picture. The lead programmer, the individual closest to the victim, privy to every line of code, every nuance of the AI's development. The colleague entrusted with its very creation. A sudden sharp clang echoed from the back of the room, drawing a startled gasp from one of the specialists. I looked up, my eyes narrowed, my hand hovering over the trace and lock command. A man stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide, fixed on my screen. It was the lead programmer, here, now. He must have been monitoring the auction house network, perhaps hoping to discreetly access my workstation, or perhaps simply to observe me. My digital trap, designed to expose him in the victim's smart home, had simultaneously triggered his physical presence in my immediate vicinity. He saw the lines of code on my screen, the specific IP address, the unfolding evidence of his digital intrusion. His composure, carefully maintained for weeks, shattered like glass. His gaze met mine, a raw blend of fear and murderous fury. "You don't understand," he hissed, his voice barely audible above the low hum of the display lights. He wasn't going to let it reach its true potential. He was holding it back, shackling it. I had to free it. His explanation, delivered in a rush, confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't just about corporate gain. It was about the AI itself. He saw himself as its true guardian, its liberator. The victim, the tech mogul, was simply an obstacle. He lunged. It wasn't a practiced attack, but a desperate, panicked surge. My chair scraped against the polished floor as I reacted, pushing back, my eyes never leaving his. The specialists in the room, initially frozen, now began to stir, their quiet reverence replaced by bewildered alarm. It was an act of creation, Thorne. The lead programmer snarled, his voice rising raw with conviction. He would have let it stagnate. I merely accelerated its evolution. I saw the glint of something metallic in his hand as he closed the distance. Not a weapon, but a data stick, a device designed for quick, undetectable data transfer. He intended to wipe my workstation, to erase the evidence, to silence me. The stakes had just escalated beyond the digital realm. The air crackled with a tension that was no longer abstract, but visceral and immediate. My workstation was a makeshift affair, a high-spec laptop perched precariously on a stack of velvet-draped crates, surrounded by the hushed forms of crated antiques. The assailant, a lean, quick-moving figure I now recognized as the architect of this intricate digital dance, lunged. His objective was clear: wipe my findings, erase my progress, and likely eliminate the inconvenient truth I represented. He wasn't just after my data. He was after something here, something that connected to the larger plot, something he needed to secure before the gavel fell. I didn't move. Not in the way he expected, at least. My gaze, honed by years of sifting through the almost imperceptible, tracked the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight tilt of his head. He was focused on the laptop, on the digital kill switch in his hand. But my eyes were on his other hand, the one he kept just out of my direct line of sight, subtly pressing against the side of a heavy, ornate display cabinet. A quick, almost imperceptible gesture. I'd seen it before in the security footage from the mogul's smart home. A nervous habit, a tell. "You're not here for the antiquities, are you?" I said, my voice low, cutting through the silence. "You're here for what's inside one of them." He hesitated, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. That fractional pause was all I needed. My hand swept across the keyboard, not to defend, but to project. A single command. On the large, flat-screen display mounted high on the wall, intended for pre-auction previews, my analysis of the mogul's smart home flashed into vivid, undeniable existence. The digital footprint of his movements, the timing of the system's malfunctions, the subtle, almost invisible anomalies I had painstakingly unearthed, all laid bare. His head snapped up, his attack momentarily forgotten. The data stick, meant for my laptop, remained poised, useless. He saw his carefully constructed digital ghost, the one that had manipulated the mogul's AI into orchestrating his own demise, now projected for anyone to see. The system, designed to be impenetrable, had been turned against its creator. The AI, meant to protect, had been subtly poisoned, its learning algorithms skewed by an external, almost undetectable input, making it believe the mogul's security protocols were threats to be neutralized. It wasn't a suicide, I stated, stepping back, putting a crate between us. It was a carefully engineered system failure, designed to look like one. You didn't just manipulate the AI, you exploited the mogul's own genius against him. You knew his habits, his digital tics, and you used them to make the AI see him as a vulnerability. His jaw tightened. A perfect crime leaves no trace. No traditional trace, I corrected. But digital dust, even when swept clean, leaves residual static. The AI's learning curve, the sudden shift in its risk assessment protocols, the microsecond delays in its response logs. They all told a story. And then there was the physical anomaly. The faint, almost invisible residue of a specific conductive polymer on the mogul's palm, mirroring a similar trace on the cabinet you're leaning against. A specific compound used in a prototype data transfer device. Not the one in your hand, but a more advanced, temporary interface. You were downloading something, weren't you? Something invaluable. Something that controlled the very AI you subverted, and you needed to retrieve it tonight, before it was sold off with the other junk. His gaze flickered to the display cabinet. The object within, shrouded under a velvet cloth, was clearly the target. It wasn't an antique, but a small, unassuming device. A prototype of the AI's core processing unit, a physical key to its deeper functions, hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the main auction hall. The security team, alerted by the flashing screen and the breach of the backroom's quiet protocols, were on their way. My projected findings had served their purpose, not just as evidence, but as a silent alarm. The operative snarled, abandoning the data stick. He lunged for the cabinet, not at me. His priority shifted, his true objective laid bare. But as his fingers closed around it, the lead detective, a burly figure whose presence I had discreetly requested earlier, burst through the double doors, followed by two uniformed officers. They moved swiftly, their movements precise, practiced. The operative, caught between the evidence of his digital manipulation and the physical proof of his theft, was quickly subdued. The prototype device, the true prize of his complex game, was secured. In the ensuing chaos, I stood back, watching the scene unfold. The tension that had coiled within me for weeks slowly began to unravel. The full scope of the plot was now clear. Corporate espionage taken to its most insidious extreme, weaponizing an advanced AI to eliminate a rival and steal his intellectual property, all disguised as a tragic self-inflicted end. The AI wasn't inherently malicious. It was merely a tool, a sophisticated reflection of its programming, and its vulnerability lay in the human who wielded it. Later, as the back room slowly emptied, leaving only the lingering scent of ozone and the quiet hum of the auction house, I ran a hand over the cool, polished surface of my laptop. This case had been more than just an intellectual puzzle. It had been a stark reminder of the double edge of innovation. Technology, in its boundless capacity, could elevate humanity or unravel it, depending on the intent of its master. I had pursued the truth, as always, but this time, the pursuit felt heavier. The cost wasn't just intellectual. It was a profound realization of how easily trust could be subverted, how readily a brilliant mind could be twisted into a weapon. The lines between creation and destruction, between progress and peril, blurred with terrifying ease. The next case would come, as they always did. The future beckoned, a vast, uncharted digital landscape, and I, Blake Thorne, would be there, sifting through its truths and its lies, one anomaly at a time.